The Four Nations Faceoff was phenomenal. In every single way, it lived up to the hype and created its own hype, which is pretty special in today's day and age. And yeah, I think this is a jumping off point for hockey and for the NHL to have a really big spring and summer, maybe bigger than the NBA's. More on that in a moment. Just a reminder to subscribe to the channel. Click on this button below me, because when you do, you'll get notifications when we go live for Watch DA Live on this channel, and when we do DA deep dives like this one. Be one with the channel by clicking on this button below me and subscribe. This was an event that happened organically. This was not a huge promotional item spread out through all of the sports landscape. Because of what happened on Saturday in Montreal, because of the fighting, because of the intensity of that game between Team USA and Canada, it built its own hype. And so I think just by virtue of that, it's a sign that hockey itself, when it's at its best, can be so good that it creates its own momentum and has the general public paying attention. And that says a lot about the sport, because if you love the sport, you already know this. But a lot of people grow up in areas where hockey is not a first or second love of the sports community. So it takes you having to get sucked into it because of something. And this Four Nations face-off, and specifically the US versus Canada in these two games, did exactly that. And once you get eyes on the product, I think the product sells itself. Now, this is unique because you had the nations on the chest. And of course, there's international animosity right now, and that kind of ratchets up the pressure. At the same time, hockey players just love playing for country. They love it. And because of the abundance of talent that now America creates and births as a hockey country versus the tried and true Canadian culture of creating hockey stardom, they are equals. They are truly equals in 2025. So it means it's not little brother, big brother so much when you're on the ice. Yes, history, of course. But when you're on the ice, these are two equal countries. And there's something really special about that. There's something very special about World Cup soccer versus MLS or versus Premier League. And there's something really special about World Cup of hockey, Olympic hockey, or in this case, your Four Nations hockey versus the NHL. But it can be a springboard. And I think for the NHL, look, a couple of things are going their way right now. Number one, the style of the game is very, very palatable. They've eliminated the goonery. They've eliminated the neutral zone trap stuff, and they've given space to playmakers and athletes, and the skill of hockey players is now on display. Now, combine that with, I think, a real boredom when it comes to the way the NBA is played, the pop-up shots, a million three-pointers, and aesthetically speaking, I think unbiased observers would say, yeah, it's just better to watch a hockey game now than it is to watch an NBA game. Secondly, for hockey, they're in the ESPN ecosystem. And that is just an important part of this. This week, a game being played on ESPN gets to have all of the internal promotion of ESPN's multiple levers and channels and outlets. So on ESPN radio, you're hearing them talk about the Four Nations Final. ESPN.com, it's all about the Four Nations Final. ESPN social media feeds, where they have millions of followers, they're pumping out content for the final. ESPN's app, it's all about the final. All of these things, and then of course the television station itself, the television channels and shows are talking about the Four Nations Final. Once you're in that ecosystem, it really helps promote the product because they have so many platforms, and so many platforms that are the number one most watched or most consumed. So that helped build this into a thing. And the Stanley Cup playoffs are going to be, once again, on ESPN. So you can help leverage that. That's been a big win, I think, for ESPN. And TNT's done a really good job of handling hockey with, I think, the significance and respect it deserves. And so I think that's a fun show. It's a fun broadcast. It always is very well done. I think hockey fans appreciate it. So the NHL has that going for it. It also has the momentum of last year's postseason. I mean, in the Eastern Conference Final between, the Rangers and Panthers, 3 consecutive overtime games. That was a great series. And then we get to the Stanley Cup Final, where you have a 3-0 series lead by the Panthers, and then the Oilers come roaring back to tie things up and force a Game 7. And even despite a series loss, Connor McDavid kind of stamps his place in the pantheon of all-time greats by winning the Conn Smythe despite not winning the Stanley Cup. So you have that as a kind of a lifting board as well coming into this season. And now the Four Nations Final. Once upon a time in 1994, there was a thought that we were going to see the NBA and the NHL flip when it comes to significance in the culture of American sports, because the Stanley Cup Final was this brilliant 7-game series between the Rangers and Canucks, and the Rangers, their first Stanley Cup since 1940, and every game was dramatic, and the whole playoffs was dramatic, and Messier's guarantee and the Eastern Conference Finals against the Devils, all of that built into this great crescendo. And then you had the NBA Finals, and there was no Jordan that year. He had been retired. It was Rockets and Knicks, and it was kind of a boring final. It went 7, but most of America, at least aesthetically, was not all into that. And there was this idea that we were going to see the two flip. Obviously, that never happened. Jordan comes back in 95. He then wins 96, 97, 98. I don't predict that we will see the NHL flip spots with the NBA here in terms of pop culture significance and relevance. But I do think it's a moment in time where hockey can take advantage. What are all the storylines right now about the NBA? They're all negative. Television ratings down. The NBA All-Star reformatting was a bust as well. One of the lowest rated All-Star games ever. Stars don't compete in the slam dunk contest. Aesthetically, nobody likes the way the game is being played. Even current players like Draymond Green is saying it's accidental basketball. Everyone's just chucking up shots. In the NBA, your best teams are not traditional powerhouses or big markets. Cleveland, OKC, Memphis. Now, we might still get a Celtics-Knicks Eastern Conference Final. We might have the Lakers in the NBA Final or a traditional power. But the point is, we could have an NBA Finals that has Cavs and Grizzlies versus a Stanley Cup Final where maybe you have a big star like Connor McDavid. Maybe you have big markets. Maybe you have a traditional foe. Whatever that might be, you have some momentum, because in the NBA, everything's been about how to change the game, what's wrong with the game. Even the Luka trade, it was, what's wrong with the Mavericks? Why are they selling him for pennies on the dollar? Are they trying to drive away fans? Mavs fans saying that the franchise has been stolen from them. Everything has been a negative seemingly for the NBA, and now the NHL is coming off this massive high, this massive sugar high, and the game itself lived up to the billing. An overtime win, incredible goaltending by Binnington in overtime to save the bacon of the Canadians. You have the anthems, you have the intensity, you had the great crowd, you had great goals. I mean, all of it, the night of hockey for this game lived up to the hype. So I think you have some real momentum for the NHL going into the postseason, going into the spring and summer. And I think they can ride this. And they can't probably flip spots with the NBA, but they can absolutely get a toehold, I think, into the sports consciousness at large. I think this Four Nations Faceoff was a huge indicator of what it looks like when your guys are fully engaged. They want to be there, and they're playing for the crest, or they're playing for the nation, or they're playing for their team. And hockey's all about team and not about I. And sometimes that hurts branding for the NHL because it's so anti what they stand for. But, when you put it up against an NBA, which can oftentimes feel like it's about I don't want to play too much. Load management. I don't want to compete in the slam dunk contest. I don't want to play defense in the All-Star game. I want to trade. When you put those two up, you juxtapose the two, there's a lot to love about the NHL, and I think they can take advantage of it with this Four Nations Faceoff being a springboard into their playoffs, into their postseason. I'd love to know what you think, okay? Do you think going into this spring and summer, the NHL can grab a toehold from maybe sports fans that have become, I don't know, bored or apathetic for the NBA? Do you think this is a moment where they can take advantage of it? Leave the comment below. I would love to hear from you guys. Hey, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. Once again, remember to subscribe to the channel by clicking on this button right next to me. That way you'll get notifications when we go live and when we do DA deep dives like this one. Appreciate you watching. Leave a comment below. I'm DA. See you next time.